Amazing journey, how a black nurse's touching act in the rain revealed life-changing secrets. Jasmine's heart raced as rain lashed against the pavement outside Maplewood Community Hospital. Another grueling night shift behind her, she hoped to escape the storm. But then she saw him, Mr. Thompson, an elderly man, shivering in the relentless downpour. An unyielding voice inside her whispered not to let him suffer alone. With a swift decision, her feet moved as if they had a mind of their own, leading her back into the rain, her soaked scrubs clinging to her body. "Come on, let us get you out of here," she shouted above the roar of the storm. The downpour drummed against the world, drowning out everything but her intuition to help. She pulled him from the elements, sharing stories that washed away the chill of their surroundings, laughter ringing between them like an armor against the storm. For those fleeting moments, warmth blanketed her heart. Mr. Thompson's gnarled hands trembled as he recounted stories of her grandmother, the fierce nurse who defied the systemic injustice that haunted the healthcare system, who risked everything to care for others. Jasmine felt a light flicker within as he spoke, memories of her grandmother's bravery igniting her spirit. Yet with each tale came the heaviness of recognition. She too was a part of that legacy of resilience, but it came with weighty implications. A bitter taste filled her mouth as she pondered the truth of her grandmother's struggles. Jasmine was navigating a system marred by the same inequalities. Patients deserving of care often relegated to corners, her fellow nurses, much like her grandmother, heroically overlooked, their dedication unseen and unappreciated. Jasmine's heart sank at the double-edged tension trimming her dreams. How could she chase recognition for herself if it meant ignoring the very colleagues who begged for a voice? Even as she listened to Mr. Thompson's stories, Jasmine's mind whirled with her own career ambitions, a practical sense nudging her toward individual accolades, the dream of climbing beyond a night shift nurse. But did her success come at such a cost? The internal chaos twisted within her, strong enough to reel her back into moments of self-doubt. Could she really be the beacon her grandmother was? Could she fight for others while still treating her aspirations like fuel to her fire? Her stomach churned with unease. She wanted to step forward, to take her place among those demanding change, but how could she speak for others when fear clutched at her throat, threatening to silence her? Soon, the storm's howling cries felt like ominous echoes of her inner turmoil, each battering raindrop a reminder of the obstacles standing between her current self and the woman she yearned to be. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jasmine swiped a hand across her cheek, remnants of rain mingling with unspent tears. The specter of her grandmother's legacy loomed larger than life, a torch aflame with purpose and clarity. But her own dreams, suffocated beneath an avalanche of responsibility, clashed savagely against the need to honor that legacy. She was drenched in rain, her heart heavy with the weight of expectation and fear, an impasse, less about her future and more about her ethical obligation. As the storm raged and blurred her path ahead, Jasmine's resolve hardened. Could she put her own aspirations aside for something greater? The ground beneath her feet trembled with the potential for change. Would she walk into that boardroom ready to rip the shackles of silence from those who languished in obscurity, or would self-interest eclipse everything she had learned? All she knew was that just as a crack of light shattered the storm clouds above, she now faced a pivotal choice, and her journey, tumultuous and uncertain, had only just begun. Jasmine stood at the edge of the storm, both literally and metaphorically, drenched in more than just rain. The weight of her conflicting desires pressed heavily on her. Each drop seemed to drive home the urgency of her inner conflict. As she watched the last of Mr. Thompson's shivering form be driven away by the hospital staff, a flicker of determination sparked within her. The time had come to turn inspiration into action. With a shaking hand, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through the contacts. She hesitated. Should she reach out to her grandmother's former colleagues, those who had witnessed the pervasive inequities firsthand? Would they validate her intentions, or was she just a young nurse grasping at shadows? This moment felt monumental, an initial step towards amplifying the voices so often silenced. As she dialed the number, the unease washed over her like the rain, threatening to paralyze her before she could even utter a word. "Hello," came the voice on the other end, warm yet expectant. It took a deep breath for Jasmine to respond, each inhale and exhale staving off her trepidation. "Ms. Johnson, it's Jasmine. I'm looking to start a discussion about nurse advocacy and how we can make changes to patient care practices with equity in mind. I think we have more work to do." The words tumbled out, almost too quickly. Would they recognize her passion or dismiss her as naive? But she was resolute. She believed her grandmother's legacy wasn't just a memory, it was an obligation. Over the next few days, Jasmine observed every possible interaction in the hospital. Nights blurred into one another as she engaged patients, her colleagues, and the physicians with thoughtful intensity. Each encounter revealed a complex tapestry of experiences that begged to be acknowledged. She found herself drawn to the break room, where whispers about unfair assignments and overworked nurses flowed like the coffee that cooled in forgotten mugs. Jasmine absorbed every frustration and each story shared, all while taking mental notes. Why was it so easy to overlook the remarkable compassion her colleagues displayed, their hands often outstretched but never acknowledged? The realization struck her hard, their struggles were like hers, cloaked in silent bravery. One evening, after another hectic shift, she approached the small group gathered in the break room. "Can we talk?" she asked, surprising herself with the commanding tone in her voice. They looked up, their guarded expressions morphing into cautious curiosity. "I feel like there are things we need to discuss about our work, our patients, the way we can advocate for change together." As the conversation unfolded, Jasmine's words unleashed a torrent of stories. Each nurse began to share their experiences, unveiling deeply rooted frustrations. Jasmine listened intently, her heart pounding as she witnessed the power of their shared concerns. For so long, they had felt invisible, burdened with the guilt of aiming for personal success amidst collective struggle. By the time the meeting ended, the atmosphere shifted. Jasmine was no longer just a nurse but something greater, an advocate, an ally. They had collectively acknowledged their struggles, and the fire of determination ignited within her. She was ready to face the boardroom, ready to confront authority with the very voices that had previously been silenced. Just as she felt the tide of resolve rising, an unexpected twist surfaced. An email notification flashed on her screen. The hospital administration wanted to meet about the issues plaguing the staff productivity. Jasmine's breath caught in her throat, anticipation and fear swirling. The time would soon come to face those who held the power to create change or bury it deeper in the shadows. Would she wield the voices of her fellow nurses as a force for transformation, or would she falter in front of the very individuals whose decisions had long perpetuated their struggles? The answer to that pressing dilemma loomed just before her, and she felt a new weight settle onto her shoulders. The responsibility of leadership weighed heavily, just as the storm had moments before. With every ounce of courage she possessed, Jasmine prepared to enter the fray. The moment of confrontation was drawing near, but she stood on the precipice, ready to take that plunge into the unknown. Jasmine stood at the threshold of the conference room, the polished floor beneath her reflecting not only the harsh fluorescent lights but the weight of her thoughts. The room hummed with the subtle vibrations of authority and expectation. She couldn't help but recall the stories shared in the break room, the unwavering strength of her colleagues, their quiet hopes for change. Each narrative swirled in her mind, forming a tapestry that both emboldened and intimidated her. What if she let them down? She entered, her heartbeat a steady drum in her ears. The hospital board members sat around a long table, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Jasmine steadied herself, drawing in a breath tinged with salt, remnants of the storm that still clung to her spirit. This was her moment, no turning back now. "Thank you for convening," she began, her voice steady despite the nervous energy thrumming through her. "I am here to address concerns raised by nursing staff regarding patient care and staffing inequities." The words felt like a spell, powerful yet grounded. The silence that followed was ripe with anticipation, and she could feel their eyes narrowing, measuring her resolve. As she presented the data and personal anecdotes collected from her colleagues, the atmosphere shifted palpably. She noticed slight reactions, furrowed brows, swift glances exchanged. These were nods of understanding, not mere dismissals. It fueled her passion further. Each statistic she shared was woven with real people's stories of exhaustion, misalignment, and underappreciation. Yet, doubt flickered like a candle in her mind. Were the board members truly listening? Were they ready to confront their own shortcomings? The thought clawed at her, testing her determination. But she quickly realized that doubt could not overshadow the urgency of her mission. This was about the forgotten voices, the lives entrusted to their care. Then, a familiar face broke through her mental noise. Dr. Davis, the head of medicine, crossed his arms and leaned back. His expression suggested skepticism. This could easily deflate Jasmine's burgeoning confidence. "Your enthusiasm is commendable, but these are very real operational challenges we face," he interjected. "How do you propose we address staffing shortages with budget constraints?" The question hung heavily, and Jasmine felt her mind racing. This was the moment everything could tip. She realized the necessity of a strategic approach. "I suggest we categorize these challenges into manageable areas," she responded, her heart pounding but her voice unyielding. "First, increasing morale through recognition of our staff's effort and contribution. Secondly, exploring how we can advocate more effectively for additional funding or resources. Lastly, developing consistent support networks where nurses can share not only their frustrations but potential solutions." The board members exchanged furtive glances, perhaps contemplating the implications of her proposals. Jasmine pressed on, unveiling her vision for a mentorship model. It could transform weakened spirits into connected champions of patient care. "You see," she continued, emboldened as she spoke, "when nurses are supported and recognized, it reflects in the care they provide. Patients benefit through improved outcomes." She sensed a shifting tide. Her colleagues' voices echoed in her thoughts, amplifying her resolve. It was not merely about filling shifts or addressing quotas, it was about reinvigorating a workforce that felt unseen. But as she wrapped up her presentation, Jasmine noticed the board's hesitance. They weren't fully convinced yet. "We understand your passion," one member finally said, "but change is always challenging. You need to be aware of the resistance you may face internally." With that, the room thrummed with unspoken tension. Could she truly navigate this labyrinth of opposition, or would her candle flicker out in the cold winds of bureaucracy? As Jasmine left the room, she felt a mixture of triumph and foreboding. What barriers awaited her? The looming shadows of indecision behind polished boardroom demeanor could eclipse her mission. She would not let this end here. The struggle had just begun, and her next steps required her to dig deeper into not only the system but within herself. Determined to rally her colleagues for support, Jasmine's phone buzzed in her pocket, a reminder of the urgent path ahead. She couldn't shake the unsettling thought, what if they chose to ignore the desperate cries of their staff? Her next move would demand clarity and strength, but lightly did she understand how monumental her journey was about to become. The path of advocacy could lead her to personal trials she had yet to confront, and she realized now the real transformation was only just beginning. Jasmine leaned against the cool wall of the hospital corridor, her mind racing as she replayed the board meeting in stark detail. The skepticism in Dr. Davis's voice clung to her like fog. How many more like him lurked within the walls of the institution, content with the status quo? The thought stirred a niche of defiance within her. If they didn't see the urgency of her plea, maybe she needed to show them. Her next move had to be strategic. Jasmine reached for her phone again, searching for testimonials from her fellow nurses, each story a thread in the fabric of her argument. She imagined piecing these narratives together, constructing a visual representation to present compelling evidence. Facts and figures mattered, she reminded herself, but emotions could shake even the hardest hearts. Determined, Jasmine scrolled through her contacts, locating Sarah's number. Sarah was known for her knack for storytelling, always weaving humor and poignant details into her accounts of the daily grind on the floor. The goal was clear: she would gather enough powerful anecdotes to resonate beyond the boardroom. "Hey, Sarah. Can we chat?" Jasmine's voice took on a buoyant tone, masking the turmoil bubbling beneath the surface. As they spoke, Jasmine felt the weight of their shared experiences lift a little. Sarah's words were both comforting and galvanizing, echoing the struggles of many. Each story recounted was not merely an obstacle, it was a testament to resilience and collective strength. Jasmine penned down notes feverishly, weaving together a narrative that felt alive and urgent. After their call, she couldn't shake the feeling of re-energized purpose. It was not just about the downtrodden voices, it was about transformation, her own pathway toward becoming not only an advocate but a leader. Building momentum was vital. Her next step involved gathering a coalition of colleagues eager to share their stories. She could hear their combined voices already, harmonizing into a resonant plea for change, yet doubt reared its ugly head again. Would enough people rally around her efforts? Would they stay committed or fade into apathy, like the many who had come before her? The hospital's culture, a fortress of tradition and resistance, loomed large. She shook off the clouds of uncertainty, channeling her thoughts instead toward actionable steps. Jasmine envisioned an informal meeting, a safe space where her colleagues could express their frustrations and aspirations. The visibility of their shared commitment could become a powerful tool, not just for individual empowerment but for collective action. But amidst this burgeoning sense of purpose, something deeper stirred within Jasmine, an urgent realization. Her responsibility was not exclusively to challenge the board, it was also to shine a light on herself and evolve into her own version of a champion. The courage she expected from others needed to emanate from her first. Could she embrace vulnerability in connection with her colleagues, becoming a catalyst for their voice? Days turned into a whirlwind of organizing, communication, and listening. As the informal meeting date approached, Jasmine's apprehension morphed into excitement. She sensed that deepening their connections would amplify her efforts to push for systemic change. On the day of the meeting, as she settled into the softly lit conference room, Jasmine's heart raced with anticipation and nerves alike. Laughter hummed in the distance as her fellow nurses filtered in, each carrying their own stories. They spoke of frustrations, victories, and dreams for the future. The collective energy was palpable, electric. Jasmine took a deep breath. This was not just her journey anymore, it was theirs as well. They clung to each other's strength, forging bonds as they stood together. But would their united front be enough to rattle the rigid mechanisms that defined their institution? Just as she was about to speak, a sharp knock echoed from the conference room door. Jasmine's heart sank but also raced at the unknown. As the door swung open, she met the steely gaze of Dr. Davis, flanked by board members. "I need to speak with you, Jasmine." The weight of the moment hit her. This was the confrontation she hadn't seen coming. What would he say next? Would the tides shift in her favor, or were darker clouds gathering on the horizon? Jasmine braced herself as Dr. Davis stepped into the room, the atmosphere thick with tension. The nurse's chatter faded into a muted hum, eyes now shifting from Jasmine to the looming figure of authority. She fought the instinct to retreat inward, forcing herself to maintain composure. The realization that this encounter might determine the trajectory of her efforts sent a cascade of adrenaline coursing through her. "Jasmine," Dr. Davis began, his clipped tone giving no hint of the reason for his sudden appearance. "I need to speak with you about the meeting. I believe we have some misunderstandings to address." His words hung in the air like a fragile truce. Jasmine met his gaze, a whirlwind of emotions threatening to surface. As the board members leaned closer, their expressions unreadable, she recognized that access to her colleagues' stories and dreams was now delicately poised against the weight of organizational hierarchy. "I'm listening," Jasmine replied, forcing steadiness into her voice. This was her moment to assert her place not as a subordinate, but as a challenger of the status quo. Dr. Davis stepped forward, creating a space that felt both intimate and charged. The tension shifted ever so slightly, as if he sensed her resolve. "While I understand you're passionate about these issues, we must ensure that changes are data-driven and actionable, not driven by emotion alone." Jasmine bit back the instinctual urge to bristle at his condescending tone. Instead, she focused on her own breathing, determined to stick to her mission. Data tells part of the story, Dr. Davis, she began, gaining momentum. But the human element is essential. The experiences of the staff can guide us towards effective solutions. If we don't consider them, we risk creating policies that fail to address the real issues. She saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes, a crack in his armor that emboldened her further. I have been gathering testimonials from the nursing staff. Their stories reflect years of struggle and resilience. It's crucial for us to look beyond numbers and understand the impact our decisions have on people's lives. You think your experiences can alter the board's perspective? He challenged, a hint of skepticism creeping back into his voice. Absolutely, she asserted. But it's not just mine. If I stand up for them, and we share this burden together, we might just turn the tide. The confidence she felt surprised her. She had stepped beyond an individual fight and into a collective purpose. Perhaps, he conceded, pacing thoughtfully. But I fear the board won't be receptive to emotional appeals. Maybe, Jasmine shot back, her nerves morphing into boldness, but until we try, we'll never know. I am willing to engage in dialogue. I'm asking for a chance to present our case professionally, with stories and data combined. A tense silence enveloped the room as Dr. Davis absorbed her words. She detected a change in the energy, a lingering intrigue, as if he was weighing her proposal against the potential risk of dismissing it outright. Fine, he said at last, crossing his arms defiantly. You'll have your chance to present at the next board meeting, but I expect your arguments to be formulated carefully. A wave of triumph surged through Jasmine, intermingling with the underlying fear that nagged at her resolve. Thank you, she managed, masking her relief. But even amidst the victory, her thoughts swirled. This was merely the beginning, a step into uncertain waters. Would the board truly listen? Would her colleagues stay committed? As she left the conference room, the noise of renewed conversations in the hallway enveloped her. There was solidarity waiting, stories yearning to be told. She realized then that her task was not only to present at the meeting but to galvanize her colleagues into sharing their experiences, to create a tapestry of voices that could ripple through the institution. That evening, Jasmine sat with her notes spread before her, feeling the weight of the challenge ahead. Each story she had compiled, each voice she had listened to now, felt like a thread demanding to be woven into a succinct narrative. Courage was no longer a choice, it was a necessity. But the clock ticked dangerously close to the board meeting now, and beneath the surface, Jasmine knew the harder task lay ahead, transforming her words into an undeniable force. The looming question remained, could she infuse her presentation with the emotional resonance capable of breaking down the very barriers she faced? The next day, as she prepared to finalize her remarks, that urgency clawed at her. She had to remind herself that vulnerability was her strength. After all, the journey to transformation often requires more than just strategic planning. As she looked at her reflection in the glass, a spark of determination ignited within her. The moment was approaching when she not only needed to advocate for others but also prove to herself the leader she was destined to become. But who would stand with her when push came to shove? Would those she hoped to inspire rally around their own stories, or would they fall silent at the critical moment? Jasmine spent the next few days meticulously crafting her presentation, each word a labor of love and determination. The stories she had collected from her colleagues morphed into a powerful narrative that highlighted not just the data-driven realities of their work but their very human experiences. She was on a deadline, and the clock seemed to tick louder with each passing hour, a constant reminder of the impending board meeting. The recurring worry gnawed at her mind: would her colleagues back her when the moment arrived, or would they retreat into silence? Each evening, she found solace in the faces of her fellow nurses. She reached out, sharing snippets of her presentation and soliciting their feedback to ensure she captured the essence of their struggles and victories. Their encouragement became a balm, soothing the doubts that lingered in her subconscious. The more she practiced, the clearer her message became. It wasn't merely about presenting grievances, but about unveiling a story, a shared truth that could no longer remain hidden in the shadows of policy. But her resolve was tested when she received an unexpected call from Amanda, one of her nursing colleagues. There was a hesitation in Amanda's voice as she revealed that some of the staff were apprehensive about Jasmine's approach. "What if the board dismisses us completely?" Amanda asked, voicing the fear that crawled deep within Jasmine. "It's a risk, Amanda, but we owe it to ourselves to advocate for change," Jasmine replied, her mind racing. "Are we willing to let fear dictate our silence?" "No," Amanda said, though her voice still trembled. Jasmine could hear the struggle, the fear intermingled with a flicker of hope. It was all too familiar, a reflection of her own internal battle. Would they muster the strength to join her in this endeavor? "Okay. I'll talk to the others again. I believe in what you're doing." Jasmine hung up feeling a swell of gratitude for Amanda's courage. It was that kind of solidarity that ignited her spirit, chasing away the lingering doubts. She decided to take direct action. She would call a meeting with her colleagues, encouraging them to share their pivotal stories about the realities of their work. On the day of the meeting, Jasmine stood at the center of the small break room, the air thick with anticipation. As nurses trickled in, their faces reflected a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She recognized the weight of responsibility in their eyes, feeling it reflect her own. "I want to hear your stories," she urged, passing around a notepad. "Our experiences deserve to be heard. They matter." She watched as pens danced uncertainly across the page, anxiety cloaked alongside a powerful collective energy brewing in the room. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. One by one, her colleagues began sharing snippets of their narrative stories of compassion, loss, laughter, and triumph. Each story resonated deeply as Jasmine connected them, weaving a rich tapestry of courage. Her heart raced. This was more than just a meeting, it was a catharsis for everyone in the room. By the end, a palpable sense of empowerment prepared them for the upcoming board meeting. But as they voiced their hopes, Jasmine felt an unsettling recognition rise within her. Gaining their trust also meant reflecting their vulnerabilities back to a system that had often turned a blind eye. The elevated stakes tightened around her. They were no longer abstract voices but real individuals whose futures were now intertwined with hers. 2 days later, standing outside the boardroom, Jasmine wrestled with rising anxiety. The room beyond buzzed with the hum of debate and dissent. She took a moment to catch her breath, recalling the intimacy of the gathering where collective resolve was born from shared fears, but doubt lurked in the shadows, whispering that her colleagues might falter when it mattered most. If they failed to speak up, Jasmine's resolve alone might not be enough to carve a pathway to change, and so, as the doors swung open, presenting her with the decision to walk into the room or retreat into the shadows of her doubt, Jasmine knew this moment was irrevocable. The voice that guided her forward was not just hers but that of all the nurses who dared to share their truths. Yet another question loomed in the backdrop: would the board be ready to listen? Caught in the threshold between doubt and determination, Jasmine stepped into the boardroom, her heart racing. The stark white walls and polished table felt overwhelming, a stark contrast to the warmth of the break room where stories had flown freely just days before. Every face around the table was familiar yet distant, filled with authority and skepticism. She felt vulnerable under their scrutinizing gazes, the weight of her colleagues' hopes pressing down on her. As she approached the front of the room, her hands trembled slightly, but she steadied herself, reminding herself of the lives behind the data, the truths that deserved to be told. She scanned the room for the support of her colleagues, finding them seated at the back, interspersed among a sea of suits. Their presence was a reminder of what she was fighting for. "Thank you for allowing me to speak today," Jasmine began, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "I'm here to represent the nurses who serve this hospital tirelessly, often without recognition." As she spoke, Jasmine focused on the faces of her peers. Each nod, each glance of encouragement revitalized her spirit, solidifying her resolve. She launched into her presentation, the carefully curated anecdotes weaving a narrative that illustrated exhaustion amidst resilience, compassion amidst indifference. Each story carried weight, resonating not just as personal testimonies but as urgent calls for systematic change in how staff were supported and valued. With each point, she fought back against the rising tide of self-doubt, channeling her energy into every word spoken. However, as the board members took notes with blank expressions, a knot of anxiety twisted in her gut. What if they dismissed her? What if her appeal fell on deaf ears? As she wrapped up, the tension was palpable in the room. She prepared herself for the questions that would undoubtedly come, thinking of how she could persuade them to see the humanity in their numbers. The gravity of the moment weighed heavily on her. She had bared her soul, representing her colleagues who had opted for courage over silence. One of the board members, a stern-faced man with a reputation for being brusque, spoke up first. You've given us a lot to consider, but realistically, how do you propose we implement any of these changes without exceeding our budget? Jasmine's heart sank momentarily under the harsh reality of corporate constraints. She took a deep breath, knowing this was a pivotal moment. Investment in our staff improves patient outcomes. It could translate into lower turnover rates, higher patient satisfaction, and ultimately savings for the institution. It's about valuing the very professionals who keep the system functioning. His skepticism remained, but Jasmine's clarity sparked a slight shift in his expression. She pressed on, focusing on the individual stories that illustrated larger issues, urging them to see each anecdote as a vital part of a solution, not just a grievance. As the discussions evolved, Jasmine felt a flicker of hope igniting. Gradually, the dialogue expanded beyond her presentation. Other board members began asking questions and offering their perspectives on possible solutions. This opening invigorated her, filling her with a dynamic sense of purpose. Perhaps the walls of this sterile room could embrace change after all. Yet, amid the burgeoning dialogue, Jasmine's mind whirled. She caught sight of Amanda frowning with concern, whispering to a colleague. It was a reminder that navigating these discussions was just the beginning. What would happen if the board members still hesitated to act? What if they chose to ignore the collective voice she had fought so hard to amplify? As the meeting approached its close, Jasmine felt both liberated by their engagement and burdened by uncertainty. The room fell quiet once more, and a decision loomed ahead, one that could either solidify the gains made or cast her back into the shadow of doubt. She took a breath and prepared to deliver one final statement. This isn't merely about our jobs. It's about acknowledging the dedication we have for our patients and each other. If we can't advocate for our own needs, how can we expect to advocate for those who depend on us? With that, Jasmine sensed the shift in the atmosphere, but fear still clawed at her insides. The moment of truth was fast approaching, and she could almost taste the impending decision in the air. Would she emerge victorious in her quest for change, or would her fight end in disappointment? The meeting drew to a close, but Jasmine knew the true challenge still awaited. She would have to confront not only the board's response but also the internal rifts among her colleagues. Could they unify behind a singular vision? Would they rise together once again, or would the fears of a few drown out the hope of the many? The boardroom hummed with a strange mix of anticipation and apprehension as Jasmine stepped out, her pulse still thrumming from the adrenaline of her presentation. The weight of her words hung in the air, but she felt a restless urgency pushing her forward. She needed to gather her colleagues, to gauge their response and assess whether her efforts had stirred a spark of unity or merely fanned the flames of division. As she entered the break room, the atmosphere seemed almost surreal. Voices that once seemed connected now blended into an indistinct murmur, their eyes averted as if caught in their own turmoil. Jasmine's heart sank when she spotted Amanda, her closest ally, seated alone at a table, a scowl etched across her face. The earlier flicker of hope she had felt dimmed, replaced by a growing unease. "Amanda, what's wrong?" Jasmine asked, her voice low but firm, wanting to bridge the chasm forming in the room. Amanda looked up, her candor both startling and upsetting. "I don't know, Jasmine. Some of us are worried you've opened a can of worms. Changes take time, and we are already spread thin as it is." The gravity of her words settled heavily upon Jasmine's shoulders. "But this is about making things better for everyone. We can't keep ignoring the reality we face every day." "Easy for you to say. You're out there advocating, but some of us can't afford to be seen as troublemakers," Amanda snapped back, her voice cracking with tension. "What if this backfires? What if they retaliate? Her mind raced, battling doubt as she felt the rift widening. Do you really believe that? That staying quiet will protect us? How long can we remain invisible while bearing the burden? Jasmine's question, while intended to provoke reflection, brought silence rather than clarity. A few other colleagues shuffled in, their expressions a mix of concern and resignation. Jasmine realized they were not just battling external scrutiny but internal conflict rooted in fear. Look, I understand the stakes are high, she continued, her voice softer now. But if we don't come together, fought against that fear as a united front, we might as well resign ourselves to this broken system. The tension in the room pulsed as her colleagues exchanged glances, unease radiating from their body language. Some visibly shrank back, unwilling to risk their positions. Others, however, leaned forward, intrigued by Jasmine's fervor. Deep down, Jasmine knew she had a decisive role to play in this moment, a chance to forge a path through uncertainty. I believe in what we can achieve if we act together, she implored. But our first step needs to be acknowledging what's at stake. Amanda exhaled sharply. But what does that mean for us moving forward? Are we going to push for those changes and risk our careers? You know they'll see us as a threat. Maybe they will, but I also think there's a chance they'll see us as the heartbeat of this institution, Jasmine replied, her determination hardening. We have to decide now if we're going to be advocates or just spectators. The air thickened with the weight of her words, the gravity of the situation wrestling within her peers. Jasmine sensed their hesitation, but also a flicker of possibility. If she could harness this moment, she might be able to turn their apprehension into action. As she prepared to make her case again, internally racing to find the right words that would ignite their shared purpose, a distant voice called out from the back of the room, a voice filled with resentment. Who do you think you are, Jasmine? Just because they let you speak today doesn't mean we're all on board with your agenda. The challenge ignited a new fire within her. She steeled herself, knowing that this confrontation was about much more than professional aspirations, it was about self-worth, dignity, and the right to demand change. I'm someone who believes we deserve more, she said with unyielding conviction. And if you're with me, we can demand it together. Tension crackled as silence fell between them. Jasmine's breath quickened, unsure whether a shift would come from this ultimatum or if they would remain fractured. The confrontation, raw and real, had just begun. Would this emerging conflict galvanize her colleagues, or would it splinter them beyond repair? The stakes were higher now than ever, setting the stage for a battle that extended far beyond the walls of their workplace. Jasmine's pulse raced as the challenge echoed in her ears, the silence amplifying the weight of her words. She had known there would be resistance, yet hearing it amplified the anxiety blooming in her chest. Her voice had set the stage, but would it be enough to rally her colleagues? They were caught between fear and hope, with her in the middle pushing against their inertia. Listen, I get that change is daunting, she began again, her mind racing for the right approach. But the only way forward is through conversation, real conversation. It isn't just me who feels this way. We're all experiencing the same frustrations daily. A few heads turned slightly, but the doubt still lingered in the room like a thick fog. She needed to break through that fog. You all sit here, worried about the cost of speaking out, but what about the cost of silence? Every day wasted is another day we endure this system. Wouldn't you prefer to fight for a workplace where we can feel safe and valued? The directness of her statement drew mixed reactions. A quiet murmur of dissent bubbled among her peers, but a few nods also brushed through the group. Encouraged, Jasmine chose her next words carefully, looking to peel back the layers of fear. I'm not asking anyone to quit or risk their jobs recklessly. I'm suggesting we gather intelligence. Let us document what's bothering us, what makes our work unbearable. Collectively, we can build a case. Amanda shifted uncomfortably but refrained from commenting. Her sharp features softened just a bit as she considered Jasmine's proposal. Jasmine pressed on, sensing the opening. Imagine if we compiled feedback and presented it to management as a united front. We wouldn't just be whining, we would be presenting solutions. We can leverage our collective voices through documentation instead of shouting into the void. Fragments of agreement began to twinkle in the eyes around the table, breaking through the skepticism. Jasmine maintained eye contact. She was not just speaking to them, she was inviting them in, building a community grounded in shared experiences and actionable steps. But, Jasmine, what if we're dismissed? Someone finally piped up. What if they don't listen? There's always a risk, she acknowledged, leaning in slightly. But consider what we lose by staying silent. Our dignity. Our sense of purpose. We have the right to exist in a space that respects us. If they push back, then we stand, together, and push back harder. But they won't expect unity, that's where our power lies. The air grew tenser as Jasmine finished speaking, knowing she had touched a nerve. The fear still flickered like a candle in the wind, but for a moment, Jasmine felt hopeful that the shadows were beginning to change. Still, the dark thought lingered in her mind, where would they all stand if this didn't lead to the unity she envisioned? All right, let's say we did this, Amanda conceded reluctantly, tension still etched in her brow. What happens if we're fired or worse? What if they retaliate against not just us, but anyone who signs on? Jasmine's heart sank, but she didn't allow her fear to show. That is the risk we must weigh. But if we don't take steps towards redefining how we're treated, we are signing up for an even harsher reality. Think about the future. She regarded them intently, knowing that her next step would be defining, that a pivotal choice was being forged in these moments. Her instincts urged her to plan, to strategize. She wanted to propel them beyond talk and into action. Each of you knows someone we trust in our department. We need to identify allies, build our coalition quietly at first, Jasmine proposed, her mind racing with possibilities. It's not only about speaking loudly, it's about crafting a calculated and intelligent approach. Their disquiet morphed into something unexpected, curiosity straining against the walls of fear. Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that she was at a precipice, an ambiguous line between advocacy and insubordination. Just then, a sudden realization struck. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about building a deeper sense of trust and agency among those around her. Together, we can be the change, she told them with newfound conviction. Yet as determination swelled, so did the fear of consequence, the reality that the journey ahead was laced with unknown obstacles. Would she have the clarity and resolve to lead them through? The moment lingered, hanging in the air like charged electricity, as Jasmine readied herself for a fight she didn't yet fully comprehend. She found her voice wanting to call them to action, yet uncertain of how to stabilize their fears against a tide of hope. The next move had to come soon, but would she have the conviction to spark it? Her breath quickened once more, readying her for the confrontation that lay ahead, the imminent reckoning she sensed from both her colleagues and herself. How far was she willing to go to fight for change? And at what cost? Jasmine took a deep breath as the boardroom door swung shut behind her, an echo traveling through the sterile air, a definitive closure from the whirlwind of uncertainty she had created. She had not just fought for her voice, but for a collective intent that risked stepping into the much-dreaded territory of confrontation with her peers and the institutional hierarchy. The stakes were immense, but she had done what many deemed impossible. She had ignited conversation. Days passed, and Jasmine immersed herself in preparation. The impending presentation loomed heavily, pushing her thoughts into overdrive. She meticulously crafted the narrative that would weave together themes of accountability, respect, and the unyielding spirit of her nursing colleagues. Each meeting, every recounting of struggles shared, had sharpened her vision. This was not just about policy critique, it was a proclamation forged in genuine experiences calling for transformation that resonated deep down in the heart of the healthcare system. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. Standing in front of the board members once more, Jasmine felt the palpable energy of resolve radiating from her colleagues seated behind her. Their belief in her fueled her confidence. She was no longer just one nurse seeking change, but a voice for many courageously standing in unity. She began her presentation with a powerful reminder, a slide that displayed their shared stories, a visual representation of the humanity behind the statistics. As she spoke, Jasmine recognized the shifting atmosphere within the room. The board members exchanged thoughtful glances, their posture now less rigid, leaning in as they grasped the gravity of the discussion unfolding before them. Each statistic she laid out was matched with poignant testimony, a symphony of voices asserting their right to be acknowledged. When Dr. Davis finally spoke up to challenge her, his tone less combative than before, it felt like the turning point she had been waiting for. "Your testimonials are compelling, but what can we do practically? What changes would you want from us that won't disrupt operations?" Jasmine met his gaze without faltering. This was her moment to illuminate the path forward, an opportunity to address not only their criticisms but provide actionable solutions. "We propose establishing committees made of nursing staff to advocate for changes in staffing policies and allocate funds to enhance the resources we can provide to patients. Remember, when nurses feel empowered, our patients benefit, and ultimately, so does the organization. Sustaining a good hospital reputation begins within its heart, its staff." The board members nodded, understanding sparking in their exchanges. Encouraged, she pressed on, "We must design support systems for staff well-being, creating more accountability and recognition of our efforts. Not only would this secure better conditions for nurses, but it enhances the care experience for our patients. We will reduce turnover rates and ensure higher satisfaction scores, benefiting everyone involved including the administration." An electric silence filled the room as they absorbed her words, the gravity of Jasmine's proposal and their implications sweeping through them. The moment felt different, the doubts that once lingered began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of purpose that started to form just above the surface. For the first time, Jasmine felt the emergence of potential alignment, a chance for mutual recognition and growth that neither group had been welcoming before. As the meeting progressed, Jasmine found herself answering not just questions but also encouraging a dialogue of vulnerability. By allowing the board members to view the personal impact of policy decisions, they began to understand that these weren't simply abstract numbers on a balance sheet, they lived in the stories that Jasmine had woven together. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity yet passed too quickly, the discussion shifted favorably toward actionable plans, a series of proposals requested by the board to discuss further at the next meeting, with the promise of taking their concerns and insights seriously. Jasmine left the boardroom with a mantle of achievement draped across her shoulders, a new confidence burgeoned within her. Not only had she confronted disparities with humility and intellect, but she had also stood firmly for her colleagues, earning their recognition and respect. The real triumph, however, lay in the knowledge that this was not just her victory but a gateway toward a stronger coalition of nurses. The realities of their roles would no longer sit muffled under layers of institutional indifference. They had fostered recognition of their contributions, values, and rights. The essence of Jasmine's transformation from a silent dreamer to a spirited advocate solidified within her. She had conquered the uncertainties and fears that once held her captive. In retrospect, she realized that her voice mattered because of the voices she uplifted in the process. Their collective commitment had transformed aspirations into a tangible reality, marking the onset of a new era for the nursing practice within their institution. As she rejoined her fellow nurses, celebrated not as an individual but as an integral part of a growing movement, Jasmine understood that advocating for change was about reclaiming her narrative. She had achieved not just professional recognition but solidified her purpose. As smiles spread across the faces of her colleagues, Jasmine felt a profound sense of belonging, a testament that the journey from individual ambition to collective recognition was indeed worthwhile. Join us in celebrating triumphs of transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories, leave a like now to feed the algorithm, comment your reactions and theories about the ending, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share and celebrate these remarkable personal stories of overcoming.